I am about to try and complete the hardest challenge possible in an F1 24 Grand Prix. Surviving Monaco in the wet, backwards against 110% AI with simulation damage turned on. The actual aim for this video, apart from surviving this race, is to complete 4 laps by the time the last driver of the 110% AI has crossed the finish line for the final time. Is this actually possible? Well, as you're about to see, this challenge was as difficult as I'm making it out to be. So, for my first attempt, I knew that I would have to instantly spin around and get driving. However, that didn't exactly go to plan. But of course, I was not going to give up after just one attempt, and not too long after this, I hadn't crashed off of the start line, and I was hoping that this could be the race to complete the challenge. So we're actually going to speed up all the way until we meet the 110% AI for the first time in this challenge, where I'm going to be trying to avoid them inside of the tunnel. As you can see, I've picked up some very minor damage, but that shouldn't really have any aerodynamic effect, and now we are inside of the tunnel, and honestly, at first, I forgot what challenge we were doing because I had to very quickly dodge Charles Leclerc. I slammed on the brakes, and fortunately, after a lot of wobbling around, by the time I got to Portier, I had avoided all 19 AI cars for the first time in this challenge, which I was very happy with. Once again, we are going to speed up until we next meet the AI, and in the background, as you can see, I've got my first proper bit of damage, which is far from ideal. But the main issue was now that the car was just so unbalanced in terms of downforce, so luckily for me, completely unintentionally, going backwards through Massenet, I hit the wall, so at least I now had equal front wing damage. Going down the hill, honestly, is just so sketchy, but thankfully, I managed to keep the car going in a straight line, and I avoided the first 8 cars by the final corner, at least from me. I decided to completely cut that final corner as it would have ended up in a monumental pile-up, and after being within about half a metre of 7 cars, I had somehow survived my first ever full lap of Monaco backwards. Next up was turn 1, at least for me on this backwards track, and through what is now the first sector, honestly looking back you can see how much I am struggling to even turn in. And it was only a matter of time before I crashed, which eventually is what happened. We're going to speed up to the chicane and my fun was about to end. I'm just going to let this play out. Yeah, honestly, I've got no idea what I was doing. If we just go back and slow this footage down, I think I underestimated how fast F1 cars turn in even without a front wing, and that was my race over. And, well, unfortunately, the crashes didn't exactly stop there. However, after about 2 hours of just continually failing at even getting past the second lap, I'd been getting pretty good at driving Monaco backwards. Which, as we start this new attempt here, was going to be so useful because I needed to get around this racetrack as fast as possible that I can successfully complete my goal of 4 laps. And by the time we had got inside of the tunnel, fortunately for me, I had not picked up any damage, which was absolutely ideal because the longer that I managed to keep the car in one piece, the easier that this challenge will be. But unsurprisingly, this period of peace doesn't last forever. On the exit of the tunnel, I remembered what challenge I was doing, and I just about avoided a pile-up with Sergio Perez. I've got no idea what he's doing in P1, just make sure that he is with his wife after the race. And after this, I simply parked the car on my entry to Portier to avoid most of the grid. Towards the back of the field, I did slowly force my way through, and I was not expecting to see a Ferrari and a Mercedes in P19 and 20. Anyway, I had now survived my first meeting with the AI, but I was not finished on lap 1 just yet. Once again, we are now going down the hill, and even though I'd probably taken this part of the track backwards about 100 times by now, it never got any easier. Thankfully, I avoided most of the grid before the last corner for me, and then going along the entirety of this main straight, I was just constantly dodging cars. This is because when I was forcing my way through the AI in Portier, I had spread out the field so much, which I wasn't sure if this was going to help me throughout the race or not. However, I had now completed lap 1, and therefore I was over a quarter of the way through this challenge, but the actual chaos had not truly arrived just yet. So we are now going through the chicane, and I knew that I had to take this section of corners very quickly as I was about to come face to face with the cars at the front of the race. The second that I got past the apex, I went straight over to the right hand side of the track and avoided the first 10 cars before the tunnel, and I'm just going to let the next few seconds play out in slow motion. Let's just stop the footage here. I mean, how was I quite literally wheel on wheel with Zhou Guanyu, yet neither of us got damage whilst we have sim damage turned on. But I'm not complaining because for the third time in this challenge, 1.5 laps in, I'd once again avoided crashing with the AI. Right, so as we speed up the footage, here is where I realised that this challenge was about to get so much harder. This is because the field was just being spread out more and more as the laps go on, and I'm going to have to continue to slow down a lot for the AI to continue to dodge them. The overall negative effect of this is that this obviously isn't going to help me when I'm trying to complete the 4 laps, which is my overall aim for this challenge. Anyway, in the background, you can now see that I am getting past the AI for the 4th time, and I'm being very careful, but more importantly, I had now successfully completed half of the laps that I wanted to drive. So the next time that I had to avoid the AI was for once at a new part of the track at the back, and this was where my problems really started. Initially, I waited very patiently to let some cars through, but I realised that I could not wait around forever as I would not get to the finish line for the 4th time before the AI driver who crossed the finish line 19. This meant that I tried to slowly get past the apex at the back and get out of the way of the AI, but unfortunately for me and Zhou Guanyu, who I eventually wiped out and made him retire from the race, we made contact. As I mentioned, he DNF'd and I had my first bit of proper damage, however I still had 4 wheels rotating on the racetrack. So we're actually going to go through the rest of this 3rd lap pretty quickly because to be honest, not much happened. I was just being super cautious avoiding the AI as I could not afford to crash because I had never got this far in this challenge before. Luckily for me, apart from the hill, it's actually very easy to avoid the AI at the start of the middle sector and most of the first sector because you can just stay off the racing line pretty safely. Anyway, we're now going to fade into me crossing the finish line for the 3rd line in this challenge, and this is where the whole video was going to come down to, the final lap. And pretty much instantly I was face to face with the front of the grid and I had to avoid the AI straight away. I just about managed to dodge Sergio Perez, and even with the weave past Charles Leclerc, I had now picked up even more damage, and this time it was on my side pod, which was far from ideal, but once again I had survived. Now we're going through Rascas and I was taking a super wide line, and on the exit of this corner I very lightly tapped Carlos Sainz. Thankfully he was at the back of the pack, but because as I've already mentioned we have simulation damage turned on, so I now had a fully damaged front wing. Another thing that was also starting to worry me was that because of the damage I was making more contact with the walls through understeer and oversteer, and this was giving me an unbelievable amount of tyre wear, especially on my left rear. And as you can see, leaving to back I now have 51% wear on this rear left tyre. I could now not risk running along the wall again because if I were to I may be worryingly close to puncture territory, which is something that I cannot afford. We are now once again inside of the tunnel, and honestly I'm becoming a bit of an expert at this section of Monaco in reverse because I managed to comfortably weave my way through the first section of the grid very easily. After this, on the run up to Portier, I managed to avoid 5 more cars, but this was where everything was about to get very difficult. Going through what at least for me is the reverse final sector, I was going to have to take so many risks. First up was avoiding 3 cars on top of a literal brick road on the apex of a turn before the hairpin. Fortunately for me, before we had got to the hairpin, I had cleared the rest of the grid, and I now had to focus on getting to the finish line as fast as possible with this absolute tractor of a Formula 1 car. Going through Mirabeau, I kept it clean, and on the exit going up a small hill to Casino, I don't think I even had a meter where I wasn't wheel spinning. Anyway, on the entry to Casino, I had a look at the track map, and I noticed one thing: I would have to pass cars once more. Going through Massenet backwards, I smashed into the wall and lost some more tyre wear, but nothing to cause me any more major issues, and after some magic, I got past Sergio Perez. Next up was Charles Leclerc and Co, which stayed on the right hand side of the track, so they were pretty easy to avoid. 200 metres to the finish line, I avoided Alonso by a metre, and I avoided Yuki Tsunoda by a distance even shorter than him. I understeered over to the other side of the track unintentionally and just about dodged Kevin Magnussen. I lost control of the car, but most importantly, whilst crashing with Nico Hülkenberg, I crossed the finish line for the 4th and final time. And therefore, I had successfully completed my overall goal of surviving Monaco backwards against 110% AI in the wet with simulation damage turned on. Thank you all so much for watching, and please subscribe because we are so close to 20,000 subscribers, and trust me, you do not want to miss out on next weekend's video.